Person who dies, we do not say his kindness died or his wisdom died. We say that person died. The reason for that is because people are well aware and conscious of the fact that whether it is his wisdom, whether it is his kindness, or whether it is whatever nature he possesses, is intrinsically part and linked to that person. Is an aggregate part of that person. You cannot separate it from him.
I agree.
Yes, that it died separately and he lived on.
But would you say God's wisdom is identical to God?
No, God's wisdom is his attribute.
But is it identical to God?
It's not attribute. Wait. You see, God has many attributes.
I agree with you.
Wait, hear me out. God has many attributes. If you're saying, if the wisdom of God is equivalent to God, is it equivalent to God? Because God has many attributes. What you're saying is, this one attribute of God, is it equal to this God who has many attributes?
I know, I agree with you. So it can't be that though. They have to be distinct things. So even though
No, it's not distinct. It's part. It's intrinsic. Part of a being is attribute. Yes.
So unless it's identical to the thing, it has to be held as being distinct. That's why unless it's identical to the thing, that means it possesses the exact same properties. Okay, it's identical. It has to be held as being distinct. So God is not his knowledge. He possesses his knowledge, but he himself is not his knowledge. Because if he was his knowledge, then he'll be identical, and that means knowledge will possess the same properties that God has.
There's a false equivalence.
No. Do you want me to tell you, this is actually a serious issue. It's been in the Christian world, it's been in the Muslim world as well, in the classical ages with Thomas Aquinas, Avicenna.
What's been in the Muslim world?
Divine simplicity. It's trying to say that is God's properties, his attributes, identical to God's self. Because if they're not, then that means that God is dependent on something which is not him.
No. The reason I disagree with that is because, you see,
I don't agree with it, but that's an issue.
I've heard this from many Christians and non-Muslims.
No, Christians have the same issue. I'm not saying it's not just a Muslim issue.
Hear me out. Actually, it was a Muslim issue as well in the past. For example, some people, the Mu'tazilites, they used to say that the speech of Allah, the Quran is created. Yes? We do not say the Quran is created. The Quran is the speech of Allah, one of the attributes of Allah. Yes? It doesn't mean that this speech of Allah is something that is a creation of Allah.
Yeah, I know.
Because you see, the speech of Allah is an attribute of Allah. Allah has many attributes, of which 99 attributes are known to us. And we do not say that these attributes are creations. I know. You cannot compare. For example, if you're talking, and you record your voice, I cannot say your voice is something that has its own consciousness. I agree. So I cannot say your voice is same as you.
I agree.
Because your voice is a part, is one of your attributes. And this is what I'm saying. Voice by itself doesn't possess any consciousness, awareness, but in the case of Christianity, you see the word of God, like Jesus has his own consciousness, his own will, which is separate to the will of the Father. Do you agree?
Okay, so the understanding again is that when you're talking and referring to the will, it's actually an issue. So something called monothelitism, saying, does Jesus just possess one will, or is it, I think it was diothelitism, that he has two wills. The church's position was that he had two wills. They had one human will, which was separate from the Father, but he had one divine will, which was identical to the Father. So his
in the same person, right?
But just to go back to my issue.
Yeah, but Josh, in the same person. These two wills are in the same person or in different persons?
Can I just go back to my issue? So,
yes, please. I need to go and
I don't want to hold you up anymore. Can I just say this last thing?
Okay.
Just with this issue.
I'll come back after the prayers. So
I'll be wandering around. But
no problem.
This is an issue because you're saying, well, there's something called Leibniz's law or the transitivity of identity, and I said it before. If A is identical to B, then A must possess all the properties that B has. They can't lack one property.
If it's identical.
Yes,
exactly. I agree. Yeah.
So, God's properties, his attributes, let's say wisdom, let's say power, they are not identical to God because they don't possess the properties that God has, and you'll agree with me.
Yeah, which I said by itself.
But then that's a bit of an issue because then that means if it is not God, then God is dependent on something which is not himself.
No, that's where you're wrong. Because when you say dependent, you're somehow separating the attribute of God from God himself.
No.
The only way he can be dependent on this attribute, if that attribute is not basically within God, it's within God. You see what I mean?
No.
So for example, if the attribute itself possesses some sort of awareness, consciousness, will, or whatever it is you want to call it, then you can say, yes, it is separate from God. It is not identical to God.
No, that's not correct. By Leibniz's law.
That's why I says it's the false equivalence.
God's attributes are distinct from him and different. Okay.
Sorry, wait, say again.
Distinct from him. So, like we said. Okay,
I don't think God's attributes are distinct from him.
They're not identical to him. No, you said that already. Okay. But I'll give you an example. And last one, I'll let you pray.
Yeah, go on.
I possess the attribute of being brown, okay, having brown skin.
Yeah.
If the attribute, the property, the proposition of being brown never existed, then I cannot exemplify the property of being brown. So I am brown because I depend on the property of being brown existing. So the same thing with God. God depends then on the property of power existing, because if that didn't exist, he wouldn't possess the property of being powerful. So it's actually a live issue. It's a serious problem. That's why a lot of philosophers had to say that actually we have to say God is identical to his properties. And I think Avicenna was one person who did it. And in the Christian world, Thomas Aquinas. And so they were saying, no, we have to say God is identical to his property, because God cannot be dependent on anything that is not identical to himself, that is not himself. So if the property of power is not God himself, then God can't be dependent on it. It has to be himself. It has to be.
I still don't know why you're separating his properties or his attributes. His attributes are God, basically.
Okay, if they are God...
Sorry, when I say his attributes are God, I mean his attributes are basically not in the sense that the attributes are separate. The attributes by itself...
No, but they're different attributes, aren't they?
Yeah, of course. He's got different attributes, but these attributes do not have their own consciousness.
Exactly.
Do not.
I'm not saying that.
I don't know why we are separating the attributes of God.
So I'm not saying that at all.
The attributes of God.
Yeah, it's just a problem because let's say the property of power. Yeah. It's a literal issue in the literature, because they're saying, did God create the property of power?
Yeah. All right, Josh, I really need to go, but I'll tell you what, I'm around.
Can I just say that last one?
You said that last time.
I know, sorry, I get Can God create the property of power? Because he will have to possess the property of power before he creates it. So he couldn't create the property of power.
No, you don't need to create. For example, it is like saying that can you grow another hand? Your hand is already part of you. Why should you create another hand or grow another hand or whatever it is?
To create the property of power, I first have to possess power. Because I have to have power to perform an action to create something.
No, you see, unless you're telling me that God did not possess power and somehow later on acquired power,
I'm not.
All of his attributes are eternal.
Exactly,
yes.
Exactly.
So to talk about his attributes separately.
To say God is the creator and the sustainer of the world, you have to say that he's created all of reality. And that means properties as well. Not just concrete reality. God created all the properties. The property of brown, the property of green.
God created everything.
But exactly, power as well. We'll carry this on.
All right, Josh, that's speaking to you. All right, whose are these? There you go. And whose are these? SCDawah.